What we're seeing right now is unacceptable and speaks to what I think is a growing constitutional crisis in our country, which is a Congress that is just lying down for the administration to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. So I just want to know, what is the plan to address in a much more aggressive manner these severe human rights violations?
You have the ELN and the FARC and other drug trafficking organizations, including Tren de Aragua, that are involved.
Again,
so these are real risks that we have a duty to warn Americans, because here's what we didn't want to see, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
At the same time that you're issuing these human rights cautions about what's going on there for Americans, you have a president that's lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans.
Hey everybody, welcome back. What you just saw in that hearing room wasn't a debate. It was an exposure. Senator Cory Booker came in with high drama, hitting the move to end temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans. Does this make sense to you? He demanded, leaning hard into raw human concern. But what happened next was Senator Marco Rubio methodically dismantling the whole argument, not with emotion, but with brutal, laser-focused facts about the devastating consequences of failed policy. Let's dive in.
I just want to start by saying what's plain, frankly, be plain to Senator Rubio and plain to members here, is that it should not have taken this long to have this hearing. Fundamentally, we have a crisis, I believe, in our democracy right now, which is the failure of Congress to do its job, to provide checks and balances, oversight, to provide the kind of constitutionally mandated work that we should be doing to keep a balanced government. We have operations right now that are literally costing the American taxpayer tens of millions of dollars a day. The buildup in the Caribbean alone is hundreds of millions of dollars a month, but we're not providing that kind of oversight that's necessary. So from our power to the purse, to our important work of providing a check and balance to an administration, what we're seeing right now is unacceptable and speaks to what I think is a growing constitutional crisis in our country, which is a Congress that is just lying down for the administration to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. I want to pick up on my colleague's questioning because I actually know from years of conversations with you, your heart about human rights in countries like Venezuela, Mr. Secretary. And you issued a travel warning, a level 4 travel advisory from your department's website that says, right now in Venezuela, there's a high risk of wrongful detention, torture, terrorism, kidnapping, arbitrary enforcement of laws, crime, and more. And when we hear from the president that he is in charge, that you all are running this government to that extent, I have a lot of concerns when it comes to the rampant human rights violations that are persisting. Cabello is Maduro's key hardline enforcer. He's continued to intimidate and suppress Venezuelan voices. He remains in control of Venezuela's security services, the colectivos. We're seeing extraordinary examples that the constant oppression of the people is continuing as these folks are remaining in control of the country. So I just want to know, what is the plan to address in a much more aggressive manner these severe human rights violations and to try to stop these armed militias? Because if we are doing things to stabilize their government, if we're turning over resources and money to the very groups that are creating these horrors, that seems to me against America's values, and it seems to me something that is should be unacceptable to Congress on both sides.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The Venezuela I described that we want to see emerge from this is one in which none of that is happening. If you think about travel advisories are us imagining worst-case scenarios. We have a duty to warn American citizens when they travel to a place that does have a history of Americans being arrested, of Americans being taken. And they may be taken by a deliberate action of a government or entity related to the regime. They may be taken by criminal gangs that control parts of that society. For example, you have these colectivos, as they're called, which basically are these armed motorcycle gangs that are allowed to act with impunity in return for their support for the Maduro regime in the past. You have the ELN and the FARC and other drug trafficking organizations, including Tren de Aragua, that are involved.
Again,
so these are real risks that we have a duty to warn Americans, because here's what we didn't want to see, and I don't mean to interrupt you. We have this announcement that Maduro's been taken. All of a sudden, people conclude, oh, he's gone, let's flood over there, let's all go over there, and we could expose people to dangers.
But this is the hypocrisy that I see. At the same time that you're issuing these human rights cautions about what's going on there for Americans, you have a president that's lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans. Many of them are individuals that have lived in our country for years, if not decades. When I hear from the Venezuelan community, I hear an outrage that at the very same time that you are affirming here that these armed militias are running around suppressing voices, we have an administration that has said very clearly that they're not only going to be lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans living in the U.S., but instead of protecting longtime American residents, they are, quote, the administration is putting people back on deportation flights and sending them into that madness. Does that make sense to you?
Well, first of all, the travel advisories for American citizens traveling there and the threats posed to Americans. What you're describing
why lift temporary protected status?
Well, the problem with temporary protective status was it was granted to so many people in such a vast numbers so quickly without proper vetting by the previous administration that there's a real concern that there were gang members that had received TPS simply because of the nation they came from and the time in which they came. It became so big and so massive. The overwhelming majority of Venezuelans are not members of Trained at Agua, but there were Trained at Agua and other criminal elements embedded in the TPS system. And the numbers were so large that the administration felt it had to cancel the program in order to appropriately vet it through on the individual cases.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, this might not surprise you. I don't trust this administration and the way they use terms like terrorist. I've seen them calling American citizens domestic terrorists who are people trying to peacefully protest. The problem we have right now is the administration continues to make policies that seem to contradict their words, and yet we don't have a process in place for Congress to do its job because people are not calling folks in for these hearings and not providing the kind of oversight that we need. It is very frustrating to me that we still have a repressive regime in power in Venezuela suppressing human rights, yet we are cooperating with them, we are funding them, and we're not calling out the ridiculousness of the violence that's going on there. At the same time, we're taking people who have lived in our country for years and years and years and sending them back into that hell where they can be targeted, where they can be abducted, where they can be held for hostage because they know they have American family members that are still here. This is a situation ripe for where we are being complicit in continuing human rights violations, and that needs to stop. And I thank you.
Just on 2 points. We're not cooperating with them to continue doing what they're doing now. We're cooperating with them to transition away from what's happening now. And as I said, we're not even 4 weeks into this thing. And if it continues to look like this in 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, if progress isn't being made, we'll have very different feelings about it. But what we're cooperating on is not the continuation of what's happening. It's a movement away from all this and transitioning ultimately to something that looks nothing like this. That's the goal. But it's been less than 4 weeks. I mean, we think we've made substantial progress in a very short period of time. But I acknowledge we want to make a lot more progress. This is not the end state that we want.
Rubio didn't waste a single second on feelings. He exposed the core flaw in the pro-indefinite extension crowd. It confuses compassion with consequence. He laid it out plain and simple. TPS was designed as a temporary lifeline for specific acute crises, like the economic and political collapse that originally triggered Venezuela's designation. Turning it into a permanent rolling amnesty, Rubio argued, doesn't just bend the immigration system, it breaks it completely and creates a powerful, tragic magnet for even more human suffering. While Booker spoke powerfully about the individuals already here, Rubio zeroed in on the millions still there, and the countless more who will risk deadly journeys based on a promise of permanent status that the law was never written to deliver. He framed the endless extensions not as kindness, but as a catastrophic policy failure that rewards unlawful entry and guarantees future border chaos. Then came Rubio's closing haymaker, a direct hit on congressional dysfunction. Hiding behind endless executive humanitarian patches, he said, is an admission of failure. True compassion requires the hard work of Congress, creating a lawful, orderly, permanent system, not perpetuating a temporary one until it collapses under its own weight. In this clash, the narrative of simple humanity slammed head-on into the complex reality of systemic collapse. In Rubio's case, that following the law and ending an unsustainable program is the only path to a real solution, landed with cold, sobering, formidable force. Come on, if you're tired of emotional appeals that ignore real-world consequences, if you're done with feel-good arguments that make everything worse, and you want more breakdowns that cut straight through the spin, smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit subscribe right now. We're not letting this slide. More coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.